Hello, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you're watching Consent Dojo. And if you're watching this live, you can put in your questions. And if you're watching this by video, thanks for watching by video. And make sure to check out the previous episodes. And they're all available for free. And you don't have to have a membership for that either. So please take a look. This is Consent Dojo. I am Midori. Some people call me Auntie Midori. And it's been about a year of learning how to build our consent muscle and ongoing consent fitness. Now, unlike the other fabulous Shibari study classes, this is not so much a class. Consent Dojo's conversations with homework as well as technique and discussing the nuances and ongoing challenges. Because consent, at the level that we're talking about, it's not simply yes and no. We are navigating the complexity of the heart, and not just in scene, totally important in scene, totally important play, but totally important in everyday life. So if you are new to Consent Dojo, please check out the past episodes, and there are some good homework in there. And I have the pleasure of introducing my dear, amazing, talented, brilliant friend and colleague. Friend first, colleague second, because she is an awesome human being. And I get to read the official bio. My pronoun is she, her. How about you, Marcia?
She, her.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who are listening and not necessarily watching, I'm doing this new thing of giving you a description of what I look like. I am a middle-aged Asian lady. I have my hair up. I have big pink wire rim glasses. I'm wearing a lime green shirt with a white tank top that you kind of can't see. I am in front of an office of bookshelves that have stuffed animals like Godzilla and squirrels, and my books in the background, as well as books from Marcia, Creating Consent Culture, and book from Bear, special topics on being a human, as well as my book, Wild Side Sex, and Seductive Art of Japanese Bondage. For those of you who are listening, hopefully you're able to visualize that, okay, get the image. Or maybe I'm a Godzilla. You don't know. Okay. Anyhow, Marcia Baczynski is an internationally recognized speaker, writer, coach, and expert on sexual communication, relationship, and consent. Seriously, no bullshit. This woman is an expert. Her mission is to help adults overcome shame and get in touch with what they truly want, romantically, sexually, relationally, and I bet with rope bondage too, even if it's off the beaten path. She's a co-founder of Cuddle Party, which is awesome, a non-sexual workshop and a social event about communication, boundaries, and touch, which has nearly 200 facilitators around the world. Since 2020, Marcia's been teaching online workshops, yay, and courses, helping her students to discover what they want, understand their boundaries, identify their needs, and explore non-traditional relationships. And she's looking forward to getting back to in-person events. And I do believe you've been coaching individuals and couples, and you're going to continue to do so?
I am, and I am booked up until July, so reach out to me if you're interested.
Okay. And finally, Marcia's co-author of, where to go, Creating Consent Culture, a handbook for educators. There you go. Which hit #1. No kidding, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. #1 in category with Amazon when it was released this January 2022. You can find her online at askingforwhatyouwant.com. And yeah, go for askingforwhatyouwant.com. That's the easiest one. And you're on all the social media, right?
I am at Ask Marcia B, MARCIA.
Great. I think I even tagged you in FetLife today. Yeah, same.
Yeah, same on FetLife, Instagram, Twitter, Ask Marcia B.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining me today on this conversation.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, we will get questions and comments from the viewers. Live viewers, please do send in questions, comments, etc. And our fantastic producer, who's on the back end, that sounds kind of dirty, doesn't it? On the back end is going to take your questions and comments and put it in a place where we can read it. So there may be a little bit of a delay, all right? So, Marcia, okay, what are we talking about today? And also, congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought today we might talk about some like slightly more advanced consent skills and nuance. I've been on this. I've been on the Consent Dojo before the book came out, so that was really exciting. And of course, now I'm really happy that we've got this out. And I want to just say that for those of you who are running events, you're community leaders, you are maybe teachers, the exercises in this book are going to be your friends, and you can take individual exercises. There's a whole workshop in here, but you can take individual exercises and integrate them into whatever you're doing. And that's one of the things I love about consent education, because basically every class I teach is secretly a consent education class. And so that makes
creating consent culture isn't just for kink.
It's not just for kink. It's not just for sex. One of the sort of interesting things about doing this work is that, a lot of my education initially around consent came via sex positive culture, came via the kink community and the polyamory community. But as I've dived deeper into it, doing cuddle parties, working with young people, working with vanilla muggles, as it were, and also starting to hear about it from other business owners and parents and things like that, I've started to realize that the larger culture we're operating inside of is really a culture of coercion. Like, we're constantly having our emotions manipulated by advertisements and influencers and things like that. We're having the FOMO button pushed. So what I've really come to believe is that consent is about what is the culture we're operating inside of. And every single one of us is a culture creator. We can influence the culture around us. And the culture is like basically all the unspoken norms about how we do stuff, right? So in a culture of coercion, we kind of move fast. We railroad over people. We don't listen. We try to get what we want without paying attention to what other people want. Or we're used to being on the other side of that, where we're used to putting other people's wants before our own needs. So it kind of can be on either side of that. And one of the things that I'm doing with this book and with my work in general is shifting our understanding of consent to really be a lot more broad, and to really pay attention to all kinds of interactions. When I'm, negotiating with a business owner about how we want to do a thing, it's about finding an agreement that genuinely works for both of us rather than trying to get something from someone on the sly, right? When I'm looking through Instagram, I stop following people that I notice are pushing my buttons to get me to do things. And really trying to focus on accounts and influencers who sort of are curious about building a better world. So consent culture is really a much broader thing than rope or kink or sex. Although for the purposes of this class, we'll talk about it in the context of rope and kink and sex.
Great. And speaking of today's time, since we can't go over all the world of consent culture, what can we expect today for me and the viewers to take away from?
Well, what I'm hoping is that we can't do exercises as a group because of the platform, but Midori and I are going to do a few little exercises that we teach in the book that are pretty fun. And that's also a thing I really believe in, is that consent culture can be actually fun, which I'll get into in a little bit, my definitions. But we'll do a few exercises to demonstrate, and y'all can watch and sort of report back in the chat about what you notice and how you feel watching it. And I want to kind of go through some distinctions that I think are important distinctions, and things that people maybe don't think about to kind of move your understanding of how to implement a more consensual way of relating in your sex life, in your relationships, with your play partners, and in your play communities. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for today.
Great.
Yeah.
Guide us along.
All right. So let's start with what is consent. If you want to put a definition in the chat, please do, of what you think consent is. Those of you who've been coming to the Consent Dojo for a while, I'm guessing you have a much more nuanced understanding of it than random people on the street. There'll be a little bit of a delay, so I'm going to carry on. But go ahead and enter it into the chat if you want to do that. Midori, I'm curious what your definition of consent is, because you've been running this for a while, and I know you know it's more than just yes and no, but how would you define consent?
Yeah, consent, I would call it engaged and collaborative with mutuality, centered on mutuality.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we can go a whole book, but
sure.
trying to is would be about being engaged and collaborative with mutuality in the center of it. And I also think of consent as it starts with the conversation between me and me.
Yes.
And that I need to it's like the angel and devil, or the two voices, right? The part of me that wants to be good girl, part of me that wants to be selfish Midori, and all of the different hats I wear. I have to have a conversation within first about, do I want this, and under what conditions?
I love that so much. So I want to take a step back and tell a little story. So my co-author Erica Scott approached me about writing this book. She was familiar with my work, and she wanted to take it out of the context of Cuddle Party and bring it to younger audience, and also to people who were kind of terrified of coming to something called a Cuddle Party. She herself, and she talks about this in the book, she herself is a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And when we were writing the book, I was like, we have to have a chapter on asking for what you want. And she goes, what does that have to do with consent? And I said, oh, and we had this whole long back and forth. And she realized in the course of her understanding, because she was still kind of growing into this, this was several years ago, that as somebody who had her boundaries crossed, for her, the most powerful part of consent was saying no. But then the next level is, oh, I get to put stuff on the table too. And in order to put stuff on the table, yeah, you have to have that internal conversation with yourself. So I have a really similar definition as you do. I call it, my definition of consent is basically an agreement about how we're going to play or spend time together. And the agreement, I think, is the word that for me is like the clutch piece of it, because that sort of includes like collaboration, mutuality, like we're both putting things on the table. It's not just a yes or no. Okay, so we've got some stuff that came in on the chat. So Skull said, a living document, an embodied fuck yes, fuck no, collaborative, aware of the direction of the gift of pleasure coming from the wheel of consent lens regarding what consent is. Yes, we will talk about
I am also going to ask that we not mention the names of the people.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Consent.
Our second is a genuine and informed agreement to partake in a given activity or interaction. Love that. So there's already some like sense of collaboration, informed agreement, and then gift, like who's giving to whom. So we'll be talking about that too, because I want to clarify some of that. So my definition is that it's an agreement about how we're going to play or spend time together. And I want to unpack that a little bit, because a thing that I run into a lot, similar to what happened with my co-author, is that a lot of us come from what I call the gatekeeper model, gatekeeper model of sex, gatekeeper model of whatever, where one person has the thing, the sex, the rope, whatever, and the other person wants the thing. And there's this idea that, especially in very heteronormative dyadic things, like the woman has the sex and the man's trying to get it, the very 1950s model of things. Her job is to just say yes or no. Her job is to be the gatekeeper. And yeah, and her morality depends on her ability to discern correctly who she should say yes and no to, but she doesn't get to have any desires of her own. And in the gatekeeper model of sex, in that very heteronormative dyadic situation, the man wants the sex, and he always wants the sex. And there's, you know, he doesn't get to have nuance or boundaries. He's just supposed to want the sex and try to get it from her. And he pursues, and we've seen this, right? We've seen this in movies, you know, you just keep chasing and chasing, don't take no for an answer and all that kind of crap. And there's problems on both sides with the pursuer and the pursued. Now, pursuer and pursued can be a very hot dynamic when it's negotiated, but when it is just placed on you because you have a certain genital configuration or physical size or like to play a certain power role in the bedroom, it's not negotiated, it's not consensual, it's not fun, and it also really shortchanges us from a full range of experiences. And what I see the most in my work is that people just don't know what they want because they've been slotted into these roles. And so what I want to move to is a collaborative model of consent, which you all are clearly on board for, given your definitions, where both people get to say yes and no, and both people get to have desires, or however many of you there are involved. And one of the biggest things that changes when you have a collaborative model of consent versus a gatekeeper model of consent is what no means. So in a gatekeeper model, a no is a rejection. In a collaborative model, a no is a piece of information. So if I'm saying, like, you know, is Main Street this way? We don't typically, you know, to the right. And we don't typically feel bad saying, no, it's this other way. So a no is information about where somebody wants to go or where they're at, not a commentary on your value as a human being. And once we make this shift.
No. If it were in any city where I'm giving directions, like I would be like morally rotten because I haven't a clue where to tell people to go.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really an important piece, right? Because a lot of our foundational things, and what I've noticed is, if you're working with people who are new to consent culture or like genuine, oh, I get a real say in what happens to my body, truly, no is frequently the place that we have to start. And that no is on both sides. It's in saying it and it's in learning how to hear it.
I'm going to pause this a sec for the viewers, and I'm going to drive this home. No is an information. Mm-hmm. No is merely an information. If you get no, it's more clarity in information. If you give no, it's more clarity in information. No is only information. Back to you, Marcia.
Yeah, and someone in the comments says no equals I am loving myself, which is, yeah, that can totally be what it means. A no to one thing is also a yes to something else in this collaborative model. That doesn't mean it's a yes to an activity with you if you're on the receiving end of a no. It might be that they're saying yes to alone time. It might mean that they're saying yes to, you know, work or time with another friend or hobbies. It could be that they're saying yes to any number of other things that have nothing to do with you. But it's again, that information, it's steering, right? The other thing in a collaborative model is that no has a lot more nuance. So I am totally in favor of yes means yes and no means no, and the enthusiastic yes and the enthusiastic no. I think those are great, but that doesn't include the full range of what's truly going on for us as human beings. So that starts to get us into the territory of messy communication, which we're going to do a little game on in a few minutes. and also the territory of maybe. So before I go into that, does anybody have any questions on anything we've talked about so far, including you, Midori?
I have a couple of things, and
okay,
which
please.
also gives us time for people to put in their query.
Yes.
Somebody mentioned Wheel of Consent,
Mm-hmm.
and Wheel of Consent is created by?
The Wheel of Consent is a body of work by my colleague and friend, Betty Martin, who Midori also knows. She wrote a book last year called The Wheel of Consent, The Art of Giving and Receiving. And it's a really simple game that you can play with a friend or a partner or lover, whatever, consisting of 2 questions. What do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? And what do you want me to do to you for 3 minutes? Or how do you want to touch me for 3 minutes? How do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? So you can do either version. But the crux of it is who is doing what to whom, for whom, right?
The for
and you
whom,
can ask in both directions.
Yeah, and the for whom.
Yeah, and the for whom is really interesting, right? Because
so for viewers, there's a previous episode where Betty and I have a long conversation about it. So check it out.
Oh, you already had Betty on the dojo.
Betty on, of course. Yeah.
Of
and
course.
I think you're doing stuff with Betty.
Yeah, so Betty and I are actually going on a book tour on the West Coast in May and June. So if you want to come see us live, you can come to a reading or come to a workshop. We'll be posting all that information online in April.
Now, and thought that I had, somebody said about let's see, living document embodied fuck yes, fuck no, collaborative, aware of the direction and gift of pleasure coming from Wheel of Consent lens, which is brilliant for sex and play and for recreational activity. It could be, rock climbing, hiking, playing a game of tennis or video games.
Going to the movies, right? Yeah.
However, that changes when it steps into the world of adulting. I will say yes and consent to yes in paying my taxes, but it certainly as hell isn't a fuck yes.
Yeah, and I think, so this is where the gatekeeper model is, the permission-based is very much external authority that may or may not be negotiated, right? So the government telling us to pay our taxes, I'm going to agree to that because I don't want to end up in jail. It's not positively motivated. It's negatively motivated. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do this because I don't want the outcomes.
Yeah, it's a combination, isn't it? Because I actually, morally and intellectually, I mean, I'm using the tax example as because I want us to look at consent. I mean, here we're at Shibari study, yes, about play, but there's also consent in everyday life. Now, so I'm using taxes because it's the least sexy thing I can think of right now. I will morally, intellectually, I say yes to paying taxes out of my citizenship. Is it a fuck? Yeah. No, it's a yes. Do I not want to? It's there's the consequence. Yeah, but the consequence is not as much of a deterrent for me. But the pain in the assness of it. I hate paperwork. So then it becomes it becomes a dutiful yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it's a combination, right?
So let's get into some of this more murky water that is not the fuck yes or the fuck no. The land of the maybe, the land of the I guess so. So I want to talk about a few different categories here, right? So what does a maybe mean? A maybe can mean a lot of different things. What I typically suggest is that if somebody's making a proposal to you about something and you're not sure, and you're somebody who has not had a lot of good practice with, communicating and enforcing your boundaries, especially in those situations, a maybe is a no. Treat a maybe as a no. If you pick up that your play partner is sort of saying, well, maybe we could, or maybe, or like they're not that enthusiastic, yes, take it as a no. So that's a good ground rule. But there's some other places where a maybe can be a little different. Sometimes we need more information. Sometimes we need to have boundaries around the activity. I'm a hell yes if we can stop by 9 p.m. so I can get home for the babysitter. But before we've had the 9 p.m. conversation, and I don't know how long you've got in mind for this scene that you want to do, I might be worried about the time, and I might not even be fully aware that that's the thing I'm worried about. And so I might be giving signals like I'm a kind of a yes and I'm kind of a no. So giving yourself a little bit of time, or giving your partner a little bit of time, or asking some clarifying questions like, what do you need to be a hell yes? Or what would make this fun? I'm not talking about turning somebody who's a no, trying to convince them to be a yes. I'm talking about when you are getting mixed signals and you can't tell, and you can tell there's some enthusiasm, but you can also tell there's some hesitation in yourself or in another person. What is the, what boundary needs to be in place? What condition needs to be addressed? What clarification needs to be there? Those are sometimes those other pieces of information that can shift it from a, I kind of want to do this, but I'm not sure, to, oh, fuck yeah, that sounds great. So that's one of the maybes that we might, well, that's two of the maybes. If you're a maybe because you're just bad at saying no, get into the habit of saying no instead of maybe. If you're a maybe because part of you is a yes and part of you is a no, get clear about the qualifications or conditions under which that shifts either yes to a no. Like, oh, maybe if you have to stop at 9, it turns into a no, right? But that clarification about time and the babysitter might be the thing that needs to get clarified. So I think one thing that's challenging is that sometimes people say yes when they mean no, or they say no when they mean yes. So I want to play a little game with you, Midori. If we were in a room, I would have all of us doing this together. But I'm gonna just
when you do online workshops, do you have breakout rooms or group exercises?
Yeah, in my workshops, if y'all ever come to one of my workshops, which I hope you do, I'm on Zoom, so I have the ability to do these exercises where you can actually do them with other people in breakout rooms. But on this platform, we can't do that. So I'm going to just play with you if you're a yes.
I am a yes to trying your exercise. Your exercise is always fun.
Yes. Okay. Oh, can I highlight something you just said?
Yes.
I'm a yes to trying. I love that. Sometimes we get very caught up in the, am I yes to doing it? Am I a no to doing it? Do I want to do this? I'm a yes to trying it. If it goes sideways, we can stop. So I just want to highlight try is an awesome word in the context of consent. Okay. So this game, I call this game the incongruous yes and no. And in the book, we call it the yes, yes, no, no exercise. And it's in here. Typically, we would play with 3 people, but we only have the 2 of us. So what we're going to do is round 1, Midori, I want you to make requests of, or actually I can do this for you. I'll make it easier on the first round. I'm going to make requests of you that I think you probably are going to want to say yes to, but you have to say no to everything I ask. And
okay.
We're going to see how that feels and what that looks like, and just sort of explore that a little bit. Okay. And then we'll switch. All right. You ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Midori, can I give you $1 million?
No.
Midori, can I come clean your house for you?
No.
Midori, I have this idea for a really hot, I think hot rope scene involving tying you to the ceiling with your thumbs and then torturing you in some exquisite ways.
No.
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 Midori, can I cat sit for you?
No.
All right, so now we'll switch and you can ask me some things.
Apology about the alarm. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Hey, Marcia, can I detail your car for the next year?
No.
Marcia, can I cook a lovely dinner for you before you go on tour?
No.
Marcia, can I give you a massage in places that you are stressed?
No.
Do I do another, or
No,
is
that's
that
good.
okay?
All right. I think you'll get the idea, right? So what did that feel like for you having to say no? You wanted to say yes. What did you notice?
Uh, regret wanting. Oh my God. It was funny that when you said $1 million, I'm like, am I saying no because I want 1.5 million?
A million just doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah. I could actually say no if I want. Yeah. Now I said no. It was interesting on the thumbs one.
Mhm.
I said no to that because half of it I wanted to say yes to, which was exquisite sensation. But the
Mm.
thumb was like, ow, no, honestly, no on the thumb.
Right.
Um,
So really good example of a mixed yes and no.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you know what's going on in my life right now, so you managed to hit a lot of the things about the car and the meal and the massage. So those were really hard to say no to because I could also imagine you genuinely offering those things. So it was actually hard to say no. I didn't like it.
There was one
And
in
if
there
y'all
that,
have any observations of
yeah,
what you noticed in yourself or watching us, you can feel free to share those in the chat as well.
there was one offer in there though that I was in the back of my mind thinking, I am offering this, but if she knows what's good for her, she ought to say no.
The massage.
No, my cooking.
You know, that's so funny because you're such a foodie. I always assumed you're also a
Oh,
good cook, but maybe not.
no, I eat other people's food. I open a can and heat my food.
Also, I'm easy to please, so maybe it wouldn't be so bad.
See, that was the one that was the two, car
Mm-hmm.
detailing and massage. I was like, okay, I'm quite sure that this is a yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the cooking one was the one where my offer was a maybe.
Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's do it the other way.
Okay.
And again, if y'all notice anything in yourself or about the interaction, feel free to share it in the chat. Okay, so this time we're gonna ask for things or make offers where you're pretty sure there are no, but we have to say yes.
Okay.
Gotta put my creative brain on for a second on this. Midori, can I come over and just ransack your closet and take all the stuff that I think is cute?
Yes.
Will you Will you come over like in the next hour or so and come over and detail my car?
Yes.
Will you give me $1 million?
Yeah. Okay. My
All
turn.
right.
Yeah.
So let's switch.
All right. Mm, 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 mm. Hey, Marcia,
Mm-hmm.
can I do a double bondage with you tied to the former president?
I hate you so much right now. Yes.
Hey, Marcia, can I can I tie you up with a giant thawed octopus around your head.
I knew it was going to involve a fish. Yes, fine.
All right. Ooh. Hey, Marcia, can I give a bad review of your book online?
Yes. Okay, so this is what you get for playing this game with the sadist. So no, I noticed very much that like saying yes when I don't want to feels so crappy, and those were all terrible things I did not want to do. And there was a lot of like I could feel it kind of like right here, or actually a little lower, like in my solar plexus, where it was just like, oh, especially on that first one. Like I'd much rather the squid. Like if we're doing options of terrible things I don't want to say yes to and have to pick, squid. But yeah, like that kind of like just that yucky sort of solar plexus feeling. I don't know how else to describe it.
The physiological, yeah, interesting part. The physiological response of the incongruity. So for viewers, when you find yourself in a position where your answers conflicted, pay attention to where and how you're feeling it in the body, and that might be a initial way to gauge what's really going on. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed the steps of thinking, right, along with the physiological. What was the first one you said? Ransack. I found myself thinking of what are all the things that you might end up taking, and I would really miss them. So I found myself doing inventory. Could I? And then sad, right? On the second one, I did the situational inventory of schedule. And then the first thing I hit on was, there's no way I can make it from here to where you're at within an hour. Now, would I be, if you live down the street? Yeah. But if anyone knows Bay Area traffic, I am not crossing the bridge and get to you in an hour. So that's a no. Last one had a very different feel, physical feel. It felt, I felt levity. Why? Because it was such an absurd idea that I was thinking like 1,000,000 pesos maybe. It was so, I didn't even have to do a mental inventory of, do I want to, do I not, how much, logistics. Immediately, it was so ludicrous, it was funny.
Right.
But I busted out laughing.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the inventory thing, right? Because when we rush to, a lot of times we feel like we have to give another person an answer right away. If somebody asks, we expect an answer. Or if we ask, we expect an answer. Like, do you want to do a rope scene? I don't have enough information. And so I will immediately start doing a similar thing of that inventory of like, how much time do we have? What kind of rope is it? Do I trust this person? There's so many things that we have to kind of fill in the context for. When I teach about boundaries, one of the things I'm always talking about is that boundaries are dependent upon context. You're a yes to some things in some situations and a no to others. It's not always about the activity. It's about the context and the meaning that we give to those activities. And so that's sort of the submerged part of the iceberg of the consent conversation is, what do I have to figure out? And a lot of times we're doing these calculations really rapidly, and that feeling of trying to figure it out is a lot of what causes us to get into that muddy middle of maybe. Do I like that alliteration? That muddy middle of maybe, where we can't tell because it's like, oh, well, like maybe you could come over and like look through my closet and then we could talk about individual pieces, but that's different than ransacking it. And, one huge gift you can give to yourself, and somebody already called this out in the chat, one huge gift you can give to yourself and to the people you're playing with, to your partners, to your lovers, is space to consider your response. Now, in this example, both of us felt pretty comfortable just saying no. One, it's the instructions. Two, Midori and I practice this stuff a lot, so we know no is a complete sentence. What happens a lot of times when people are doing that mental inventory or calculus on context is they feel like they then have to explain their no. No, because I have to, I don't know how we will get Donald Trump here, whatever. Like, I don't know where to find squid. I don't have, I mean, it's that complexity of trying to figure out our no. Sometimes when people give an explanation, what they're actually trying to point to is the conditions under which, if those change, they would be a yes. And sometimes what they're trying to do is come up with a good enough excuse because they don't think you'll take no for an answer. And it's hard to tell sometimes which one it is. A huge gift you can give, again, to yourself and to other people is say, you don't have to explain, but if there's more information you want to share, I'm all ears. Because again, getting away from that like gatekeeper model and into that collaboration model, more information can help you find that good, juicy, oh yeah, I totally want to do that. As long as my hip isn't bent in this particular direction, I'm a fuck yes. But people who are kind of new to consent conversations might not know how to say that. They're just going to go into, but I shouldn't say anything because then they might not think that I'm cool enough to play with and about my hip or whatever.
Yeah, that consent is contextual, and that's part of what makes learning about and building our consent muscle challenging. Because as in our teaching, we notice that at a basic level, people want an easy formula to be able to tell that. But it is complicated.
It is complicated. I mean, the easy formula is if it's a maybe, say no. If you're yes, say yes. If you're no, say no. If you're maybe, say no. And you're allowed to change your mind. Those are the 4 core pieces of what we've been doing with Cuddle Party for years in a contained context where there's a facilitator you can go to if you're having a more complicated problem. Those rules have served me really, really well in my life. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, have you always been good at boundaries and asking for what you want? I was like, no, actually, it was literally years of practicing those 4 rules in my life and in my work that made me good at it. But the truth is a lot more complicated. And those 4 rules will help you start to get into the more nuanced pieces because it is that context and nuance and yeah.
And so much of it is, I'm going to have you in a moment go over the 4 rules.
Yeah.
So much of it is, as it gets nuanced, the internal conversation, right? The noticing the sensation in the belly or the neck or whatever, doing a mental inventory, figuring out what we're saying no or yes to, how much fuck yeah, or sort of yeah. So it's all this internal machinations that we're having to gauge, as well as keeping in mind of what's my conditioning and baggage from my family and culture of origin that I'm struggling against.
Totally.
And also what's the, Marla and I talked about the pre-existing privilege differential before we come into negotiation.
Yes.
Yeah, and
we actually have a whole section about that in this book, and it includes a little self-assessment that's not really about being in any particular place, called the power and privilege wheel, where you can sort of situate yourself. Like certain things are more privileged than others. So proximity to power. So in the middle is power. One that we don't think about a lot is age, right? And in our culture, people who have more access to power are people who are in their middle years, very young and very old people. usually don't have as much power. As we get older, we have more access to power, and then we start to lose it. In American culture, this is, a thing that a lot of people that I know have had to deal with. People who have English as their first language, right? Or learn English. If you've learned English, you have more power than people who don't speak English, right? So these are all different things. Race, wealth, owning property, body type, religion, sexuality, citizenship status. So there's a lot of things that can affect that. And we address that in the book. So I want to touch on something also that you said too, and this is a thing that I'm always on about and is also in the book, is the spectrum of, we talk about fuck yeah and we talk about fuck no, but there's like a whole spectrum in the middle. And this is something that Betty Martin and I kind of worked out a bit together, and she talks about it in her work a lot too, is that there's this myth that when it comes to sex in particular, or kink, or any kind of very intimate recreational play, let's say, that I only want to do what my partner wants to do, which is bullshit. I'm going to just call bullshit on that. You want things regardless of whether your partner wants them. And then what happens is a lot of times we're like, oh, they don't want that. I don't want to be seen as a bad person. I'm going to try to stuff that back in the bag and not want it. We have desires. Your sexuality belongs to you. Your kinks belong to you. Your desire for sensation belongs to you. Your nervous system belongs to you. What gets you going belongs to you. Doesn't belong to the relationship. It belongs to you. We come together in relationship and we put those things on the table and we see where the overlap is. And the truth is sometimes we want things that our partners really don't want. And sometimes we want things that our partners are actually willing to give us wholeheartedly with no punishment or strings attached. And we just have to learn how to accept it and take yes for an answer. And that's really vulnerable, because then you're doing, that you're doing the activity only because you want it. That you're both there because your desire is driving the show. And that's incredibly vulnerable. It is also the secret to hot sex. It's learning to take yes for an answer. Wholehearted willingness so there's, on the one side, there's like wants. When I'm alone, before I ever met you, whatever, I think about this. This is a thing that turns me on. This is a thing that gets me going. I want this. On the other end is things we have learned to tolerate, endure, go along with. All of us have these things. We all learn how to do this before we can speak, as Betty says. In the middle is this range of wholehearted willingness where it's like, no, that's not my idea. Never crossed my mind. Sounds fun. Let's try it. Oh, you're into that? I'm down. Let's go. Like, that is like, do I ever want to go to Walmart? I do not ever want to go to Walmart. But when my mother was alive, if she wanted to go to Walmart, I wanted to go to Walmart with her. It wasn't my want, truly. It was a wholehearted, enthusiastic willingness. And so when we talk about this enthusiastic yes, it kind of comes in two categories. There's the hell yes, that's what I want. And then there's the hell yes, I really like you and I'm really into making you happy. Or I'm really into whatever you're into, because I have no reason not to be, because it sounds fun. Never would have crossed my mind. And that is an important distinction, because it can get very easy to not just fall into tolerating or enduring and going along with, but it can also be very easy to fall into, I'll just do whatever they want and then I don't have to be vulnerable. And then that can get very sticky if you don't have that full range into want. So that's why I think asking for what you want is such a crucial skill. And this was that conversation I had with Erica, my co-author, was like, she got it once I started to explain, like, if the only things on your consent table are the things you are willing to tolerate or the things you are wholeheartedly willing to do, but your desire is nowhere in the equation, you're not going to have as much fun. It might be consensual, but it's never going to get you what you want.
as you were talking, I was visualizing how that would feel in a scene, right? So if let's say I'm casting rope and topping in a scene, and if the person receiving rope and bottoming to me is coming from expressing and coming from a place of, I'll do anything that you want to. Like stereotypically, people might think, oh, yeah, that's great, because Midori must love that because she's getting to do what I want. Whereas it actually makes me really uneasy and seriously diminishes my desire to play with them, because I now cannot trust that there will be a no or a boundary, and I cannot be confident about our communication.
Absolutely. If you don't hear a no, then you can't trust a yes. There's another piece to it too that I think isn't discussed enough, which is if I really like you and you really like me, and one of us says, hey, how about you tie me up? And you say, oh, that could be really fun. Both of us are unwilling and no one's desire is on the table. So we're both willing to do the thing. So this is an example I give a lot in my workshops, right? You go on vacation with a partner. One of you says, oh, well, we could go to this. We could go here. We could go to Cape Cod. Oh, yeah, Cape Cod's cute. They've got this cute little restaurants and the weather's nice. Oh, yeah. No one has said they wanted to go to Cape Cod. You're in Cape Cod walking down the street, and one of you says to the other, oh, I'm so glad you wanted to do this. And the person says, your partner says, I didn't want to do this. I thought you wanted to do this. How did we end up in Cape Cod, right? You can end up playing with rope and having a nice time, but nobody wants to do it. And there could be something that you both wanted to do.
So let's go back to, for me as well as for the viewers, the rope bondage example, because as I was listening to it, just lightly listening to it, and anyone out there might have thought that sounds like a fine negotiation. But what's the part that you're putting a pin in, highlighting?
That no one said what they wanted. Somebody said, hey, we can do some rope.
Let's review this.
Yeah. We could do some rope. That could be fun. Yeah, that sounds nice. No one is saying what they want.
So we could do rope is essentially a passive abdication of one's own desire.
Right.
And saying that I am guessing that if we did rope, we could have a good time.
I'm guessing that if we did rope, we could have a good time. I'm guessing that's what you want. And then the other person is guessing what I want. But maybe it's both of us. No one's mad about it. But it's also no one's desire.
And speaking of power and privilege, I love that power and privilege diagram wheel that you have. For many of us who've been raised in whatever demographics where we're trained to not speak our want, that somehow that's rude. So, for example, Asian female, right? Asian cis female, that one dilutes and camouflages desire as if it's really about you.
As if it's really about you, exactly. And there's demographics. There's also family dynamics. I mean, I run into a lot of straight white cis men who have money who still can't speak what they want because they were raised in families where they were not encouraged to, or they were mocked for whatever reason. I mean, that can happen to anybody. And I'm from the South, no one says directly what they want where I grew up, especially not women. Women don't do that where I'm from. This is definitely a learned skill. So that whole place of willingness it's wholehearted willingness, not tolerating and enduring or going along with it, struggling, putting up with that, not that stuff. The willingness is an interesting place because, especially with consent, because you can end up in a place that no one's mad, no one's upset, and also no one wants. And you have to learn how to put what you want on the table. I teach this example, and then somebody in a workshop said, "Oh, we almost bought a house like that," and proceeded to tell a whole story about how one of them started talking about how it would be nice if they had more space, and the other one said, "Oh yeah, there's a house for sale down the street." They spent 6 months looking at houses, were about to sign the contract, had the paperwork, and they were about to close, and one of them said to the other, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And they said, I like, and are you sure you want to do this? I really like the house that we're already in. Wait, I thought you wanted to get a bigger house. I'm happy with the house we're in. They spent 6 months looking at houses because they both thought the other one wanted a house, a new house, a different house. They were both content in the one they were in because nobody had ever said, "I want." They just assumed the willingness. And then when that person told the story, somebody in the class said, "Oh, that's how I had kids." Nobody wanted them, but we just kept talking about how we could.
So in kink play and rope bondage, bring it to a narrow laboratory.
Yes.
How can anyone out there, how can I recognize when I am speaking, and because of the way that we've been raised on how to ask for anything, how will I recognize when I am speaking without me in the center of the desire? And how can I recognize when I am speaking with me in the center? Because the first way it was phrased is oftentimes how a rope bondage scene can start.
Absolutely.
With or without centering my desire.
Yeah. So I think, and that's a really good observation, because the language doesn't necessarily tell you whether the person's desire is present. I could be saying, "We could do this because I think it's a great idea and I'm really into it." Or I could say, "We could do this because I think you want it and I'm not a no." Those are different. So two things I like to do. Put a "may I" or "will you" in the sentence. Make an actual request. "May I" or "will you" take an action on the other's body for my own pleasure. Those are great. The other is to literally say, "I would like XYZ." If you put either of those in there, it will force you to actually consider what you want. If you are fuzzy about whether the other person is giving is doing the activity because they're like, "Fuck yeah, I want this," or "Fuck yeah, I want to give this to you." Honestly, if you have a hell yeah and they are willing, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with, and in fact, I would say the majority of good interactions are probably one person's willing and one person wholehearted willingness and one person's want. That's going to make up the bulk of your good experiences. Sometimes you hit that sweet spot where you both are like, "I've been fantasizing about that too. Let's exactly like that. Let's go." But most of the time it's like, "Oh, in my fantasy it was like this, but I'm willing to do it that way." Like, "Oh, in my fantasy it was, full suspension, but you're not confident in that. Great, we'll do a half suspension. That's fine. We'll work up to that, whatever." So, putting in your own "I want" or "I'm willing," or sorry, your own "I want," "will you," "may I," those 3 things. Want? That's the worst question. It's too broad. Nobody ever knows the answer. If you don't know, say, "Would you prefer this or this?" Would you prefer this or this? That may not get into their true want, but it'll at least get them closer to that enthusiastic, fun, "We're having a good time. We're doing this because you want it to." Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It's like the eye doctor thing. Do you prefer A or B?
Or B.
I suppose we could also add another one to that. Would you like A, B, or something else?
Yeah. Sometimes even just asking, the something else is a great thing. I also really like putting in time limiters. Like, "What do you want for the scene tonight?" is a really different thing than "What do you want?"
Yeah.
Or even "What do you want to do tonight?" is, what do you want for the scene tonight?
I could see
Let's say
how
tonight I might be thinking about dinner or something else, right? Narrow the context when you're asking what the other person wants.
I could see for somebody new to kink, BDSM, or rope bondage, being asked, what do you want? There's that overwhelm, but I don't know what my choices are.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And then there's this whole thing about, what am I supposed to like?
Yeah.
Right? And for people with more experience, or maybe a lot more experience, if you were to ask them, what do you want? It's like, wait, there are like 57 things that I want, but when, how, right now?
How? We're gonna fit. How much time do we have? I need context to be able to narrow it down.
Yeah. Oh, and I apologize. We veered off about the 4 rules.
Oh, say yes when you're a yes. Say no when you're a no. If you're a maybe, say no, and you're allowed to change your mind. These have served me.
I'm going to have you say that over again so people can write it down.
Yeah. If you're a yes, say yes. If you're a no, say no. If you're a maybe, say no. And you're allowed to change your mind.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I do have another thing. One more thing I want to talk about, unless you have a question.
No.
Okay, so this is a bit of a topic veer, but I think it's actually relevant to a conversation you may have had recently with Misha Bonaventura. Part of consent culture is dealing with crossing people's boundaries or having your boundaries crossed. There are people who are just shitheads and who are predatory and who are not really ever going to come to a class like this, and we kind of in our communities need to keep an eye out for them. Those people exist. Sociopaths, abusers, whatever. There's also a lot of us who are on our learning curves, even after years of doing this, or whether it's a learning curve about consent in general, or on a learning curve about you or you about them. Like, we have to learn each other's communication quirks and cues and tells and things like that. We will cross each other's boundaries. We will have misunderstandings. There will be consent incidents, let's call them, or accidents. I don't use the word incident or accident to minimize it. If you get into a car accident, it could be incredibly severe. It doesn't mean anybody intended it, but you might not be able to walk afterwards. So a consent accident can still have a tremendous impact on someone. American culture in particular is very litigious, and we always love to look for somebody to blame. American culture is also very carceral. We love to put people in jail and punish them for their wrongs. And that is not conducive for people who intent is not us. People say, oh, impact, not intent, which I agree with. The impact matters more than the intent, but the intent also matters. If somebody is genuinely trying to be respectful and fucks up, that's a different situation than somebody who does not fucking respect you or respect the community or respect their partners or whatever. So impact matters. Intent matters. Impact matters more. An accident doesn't mean it's necessarily minor or can be brushed off. And something that I think a big learning curve, I think, for all of us, myself included, is what do we do when we screw up? And I know you had a conversation recently with Misha about how organizations can address that. I think there's also a thing just in our friendships, in our communities and with our lovers, learning how to apologize well, learning how to apologize in a meaningful way, learning how to listen to what the impact was and be impacted by, wow, I did that to somebody, and not make it about ourselves, but actually stay in relationship. Those are pretty advanced relationship skills, and it's easier to just say, well, fuck you. You're a bad person. You should be banished. I've worked on a lot of repair processes with people behind the scenes, of people in play party communities who have crossed boundaries. A lot of times when they come to me, they want to do the work. So the people I end up working with are not people who are mandated to do this stuff. It's people who are like, shit, I've got a blind spot and I keep hurting people and I need to figure out what that blind spot is. And I think that when we go to writing people off for screwing up as our first move. I still think that should be a tool in the toolbox, especially for people who show no remorse and don't seem to care, or who just can't manage their impulses that end up hurting people. It's like, you're not tall enough to ride this ride. It's fine. Just, this is not the community or the play space or the relationship for you. Okay, cool. We don't have to call them terrible people to also set boundaries. So that's another thing. But there's a piece about apologizing and making repair that we don't have time to, I mean, that could be an entire talk probably on its own, but I just want to like highlight that for everybody as a thing to look at. When you hear that somebody did something, what is your immediate reaction? Do you go to say minimize it? Because sometimes we don't want, like, that's my friend. He didn't mean to do that thing. She's a good person, you know? Do we minimize the impact on the, I don't want to say victim, but the person who was harmed? Do we immediately take the person who's harmed side and try to write off the person who did the thing as a terrible, bad person? Those are the two most common impulses. But I think there's a lot more nuance, and this kind of goes to one of the central tenets of what I think creating consent culture is slowing the fuck down. Slow down to listen when you ask, slow down to listen to yourself, slow down to hear more about the situation, slow down to pay attention to the nuance. And yes, we do have a chapter about it in the book, but also I think this is something that you know, we want it to just be done because it's uncomfortable, and we want it to be done. And what usually happens most often is the victim gets blamed. What happens second most often is the person who did the thing is blamed and shamed and you know, cancel culture, whatever, which means different things in different times, and some people are supposedly canceled and are still making millions of dollars. But in our local communities, sometimes that really is, like, people do get cast out of spaces without ever having to like talk about, you know, maybe given an opportunity to have a conversation, not to necessarily stay, but to understand. So I think that there's a lot of nuance there, and that's a much bigger conversation. But I think the thing that I would suggest for those of us who are participating in this class and other workshops is, how can you slow down and be back up, but not necessarily take sides initially. Sometimes you do have to take sides, but slow down to find out what's really going on and what skills might have been missing, where do we need to learn, where do we need to grow. So that's a really tricky conversation that we could spend a lot more time on, but slowing it down is probably the number one thing I would say.
Yeah, especially when the emotions are high, the fight flight is triggered.
We're doing it online, so we can't co-regulate with each other's bodies and look each other in the eye and as we hurl accusations.
Oh, and could you explain to the folks about co-regulating?
So a thing that people do, I think all mammals do this, is when we are physically together, our breathing is more likely to sync up, our heart rates are likely to sync up, and that's like when things get tense, they're likely to sync up, but also when they go down and you know, chill out, we're more likely to do it together. When we're online, it's very asynchronous. So somebody might make a casual throwaway comment that they weren't really, you know, they weren't that worked up, but you interpret it as they meant it like this because you don't have any of those unconscious clues, and they really are unconscious. They're things our bodies are doing all the time. So that's, yeah. And then syncing up our breathing, syncing up our heart rates, kind of being able to look each other in the eye, kind of see that there might be more going on or a different thing going on. All of those unconscious, like if we did that exercise of the unconscious yes and no just as a type thing, the pause, the body, the eye movements, the the size, all of that would be
the
missing.
tone.
The tone, all of it.
Yeah.
So when we're doing these kinds of, I think the internet's a wonderful thing. I think it helps us to move information along that needs to be moved along a lot faster. Sometimes that has been a major missing piece in communities, and so I think it is a good thing. I just think it is also a thing that is a bit like fire.
Technology.
Like, it's either going to light up the room or it's going to burn your house down, and you need to pay attention to which one you're doing.
Good analogy. And the asynchronousness, as well as not being able to pick up the various cues, there are a lot of things that the internet's great for, but it does bias us to the written language. And in a lot of ways, the technology has not caught up to all the complicated ways in which humans communicate, conscious and not conscious.
Yeah, so I think that there's something there for all of us to consider, like when something's going on that doesn't, when I say slow down, I say don't take sides, I'm not saying absolve yourself from it if it's in your community. I want us to be engaged in these conversations. I think it's important to be. I spend a lot of time engaged in these conversations. I'm saying resist the urge to have the answer quickly, and resist the urge to have it, as you were saying, in the written word, because these are all things that are happening on the somatic level. The yeses and the nos and they're all coming from our bodies. And so by the time it gets to words on a screen about what happened, there's a lot of missing context. And it's not because anybody's intentionally doing it. It's because it's not possible to include it all.
Question. Yeah. You mentioned about working with individuals who want to improve on their blind spot, right?
Yes.
And that process. I think a lot of people it's kind of a new thing, right?
Yeah.
So could you explain who it might be good for and what it entails?
Yeah, so this is something that I do some work with, and I have other colleagues that even if I'm not available, I have other people I can refer who are really great. It's for people who typically want to be involved in some kind of sex positive community, kink community, rope community, who are, first of all, just, they might be new and they're just looking to kind of get more nuance about their tendencies that you can't get in a class like this. So like if, for example, you're somebody who, I tend to get overexcited and like I'm like a big puppy dog, and with all of the positive and negative that entails, that might be a good thing for you. If you're somebody who, I tend to let people run all over me and railroad me into doing whatever they want, that would be another great example of somebody who this work could be really good for. I tend to get carried away in situations. Like I'll be really good about my consent conversations on the front end, but then there'll be a tipping point and I tend to get carried away. That would be a third example of somebody this kind of work might be really good for. So it's, you care about consent, you care about having, good agreements, but there's some kind of either skills missing, information missing, or blind spot that you have one, but you can't quite get around it. So those would be some examples of people. The process is different depending on whether you're front loading it or if it's after some incidents occurred. If you're front loading it, looks pretty traditional coaching, where it's like, okay, you come in, this is a thing you want to work on. Let's work on skill building and noticing where it tends to show up and give you some new ways to engage with it. So that's pretty typical coaching work that I do. If it's on the back end, if it's like, okay, I've been going to these events, or I've noticed that I've had this issue with 3 partners now, or my past 3 partners have come to me and told me that there's this issue that I don't even understand it. It's going to look a little different. One of the things we're going to look for is what rights and responsibilities are at play, particularly responsibilities, and who are you accountable to in your community. And when I say accountable, there's like a bit of a sense of like finger wagging, and that's not what I mean at all. I think very much in terms of our relationships are what situate us in the world in a lot of ways. They tell us who we are. And there are certain people that maybe we want to impress. There are certain people that maybe we could do better by. It doesn't matter what the status is on those things. They're the people we're accountable to. We're in relationship. They're a lot of people will also say, oh, I want to be responsible to the community. I'm like, what community? I know this is one of your pet peeves. So one of the things we do, if it's sort of on the back end, is we start by getting crystal clear about who and what your responsibilities are to, what you have a right to, what other people have a right to, how those things kind of come. Domain is kind of the word that I use to sort of encompass all of that, and really get crystal clear on like names. Give me names of people, not just, oh, this club or this person's rope dojo or this person's, it's no, there is no community. There are people. Let's get it specific. So that's where we start. And then from there, we look at the specific issues and kind of get into it. So like I said, it's a little different if you're front loading or if you're recovering from having been told about yourself.
We've got a few minutes left. I want to go over, in a few minutes, for those of you who are watching live, if you have any questions, comments, or gratitudes, please put it in the text. And do you have any homework for us?
Well, I would say practice the 4 rules in your life and teach them to everybody that you know. If you're a yes, say yes. If you're a no, say no. If you're a maybe, say no. And then the most important one might be practice changing your mind. So I would say that. I do have a free consent download on how to make consent conversations sexy, which is available at askingforwhatyouwant.com/consent. It covers some of the same stuff we talked about here, but it's also much more focused on how to do it in a way that's like actually hot. So I would suggest downloading that and practicing the things in there. You'll see me talk about the gatekeeper model. You'll see me talk about some of the other stuff that we talked about today. And then the third thing I would say is third and fourth. Pay attention to the no's you get in your life and how you respond to them. And see if you can shift it from any place where it feels like rejection to feeling like information. Or if it already feels like information, notice that.
And do you mean just in play or in all interactions?
I would say really in all interactions, but you can, I typically say start where it feels like there's some juice, but it's not overwhelming. So for some people that might be in play, and for some people that might be, at Starbucks.
Right. And since the viewers may have different access to play or partners,
right?
Some of you, lucky devils, have like lots of play all the time, and some of you are looking and hoping.
Right.
So wherever it is that you may encounter a no.
Yeah. And then the other thing, the fourth one is notice in yourself and others, look for the incongruous yes and the incongruous no. That is probably one of the biggest gifts we can give one another, is you said yes to that, but I want to check in. Is there any what? It seemed like there was something else there. Or you said no, but is there part of this that you want to be a yes to? And if so, let's take that out and isolate it.
Now, I know you're going on a book tour with Betty, so it gives me the image of in a car. So the incongruous yes and no is probably a good car game for...
Oh, yeah. Oh, play that game. That's a great idea. Yeah, play that game in the car.
And it can be about playthings, or it can be like whatever it is that you see while driving along. And I think it's a good road game.
Oh, I had not thought of that, but I think you're right. And yeah, Betty and I will be on a road trip, so I'll report back on Instagram.
Can you do an audio recording of that?
Sure. I'm going to want to stop at every weird roadside attraction. So there's already a built-in thing that I know I want.
Do an audio recording of that. That would be so funny.
Yeah.
I'd be all over that.
Yeah. So if folks have questions, by all means, drop them into the chat. I really just appreciate everybody watching and listening, and whether you're here live with us now or later on.
And where can people find you?
Yeah. So the book is called Creating Consent Culture, and my co-author has a website, conveniently creatingconsentculture.com/book. So it has all the places you can buy it there. If you buy it on Amazon, please write us a review. And then you can find me at askingforwhatyouwant.com and get that download at askingforwhatyouwant.com/consent. There's a workbook and an audio that are about an hour long. So
great.
How to make consent sexy.
Now, before I say goodbye to you and goodbye to the viewers, I have a request for the viewers. Yes. We've been doing Consent Dojo for about a year now. This is an experimental project. I love doing these, and I love featuring these amazing, talented friends and colleagues of mine. What I want to know is what's working for you about Consent Dojo? What else would you like to see? Have you gained tools and insights from the year that we have spent together? And you can always look at the previous episodes. And I would like to keep doing this. Would you like us to, and Shibari Study, to keep doing Consent Dojo? And who do you want on as a special guest? So would love to hear that. And speaking of asynchronous, for those of you who are watching, I can't see you.
I know.
So let us know. Let me know. Let Shibari Study know, and how Consent Dojo has impacted your life. So let us know all of that. And Marcia, thank you. And I wish you all sorts of success with your book tour, your book, the classes, and the coaching, and all the magical things that you do. And when you're back from your tour, coffee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send me up. Always.
Great. Are you going to Dark Odyssey?
Summer camp, probably.
Okay. I'm gonna try.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you all, and bye.
Bye, everybody.